"You'll learn," she said the night she moved in. "I don't tolerate being ignored." It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like policy, something printed in a handbook, enforced with quiet consequences. Vivian Hale stood in our kitchen as if she'd always belonged there. She'd already taken off her coat, already set her handbag on the counter like it was a designated spot. The house smelled faintly of her perfume, clean, expensive, too composed to be comforting. My father hovered behind her with the eager tension of a man trying to prove he hadn't made a mistake. "Sweetheart," he said to me, voice too bright, "Vivian's just adjusting. Big change for all of us. 6 months. That's how long he waited after my mother died before he remarried. Quick. Efficient. Like grief had an expiration date and he'd met the deadline." I nodded because nodding was what I'd learned to do when adults rewrote your reality and expected you to clap. "I'm not ignoring you," I said carefully. Vivian's gaze didn't soften. It didn't sharpen either. It stayed steady, precise, like she was assessing whether my answer met standard. "You will," she replied calmly. "It's instinct for people like you. People like me. Quiet. Observant. The kind of person who disappears to avoid conflict and calls it peace." She turned her head slightly, looking past me at the dining table as if the setup offended her. "The chairs are misaligned," she noted. My father laughed, relieved. "She's particular." Vivian didn't laugh back. She walked to the table and adjusted the chair by a fraction of an inch, then another, until everything was perfectly symmetrical. The motion was small. The message wasn't. This house had rules now, and she intended to be the one writing them. I tried to keep my voice neutral. "I have class tomorrow. I'll be up early." Vivian finally looked at me again. Up close, she was immaculate, hair pinned back, makeup minimal, expression controlled. Not cold in the way people imagine coldness. Cold in the way a locked door is cold. Smooth, silent, final. "Then you'll eat breakfast with us," she said. "Us." I echoed before I could stop myself. My father's smile flickered. Vivian didn't react. "That's what families do," she continued, as if the word family could be installed like furniture and expected to hold weight immediately. I felt something shift inside my chest, an old instinct rising. Shrink. Agree. Don't create a scene. But another thought slid underneath it, quieter and more unsettling. She wasn't trying to impress my father. She wasn't even performing for the role of stepmother. She was looking at me like I was the only variable in the room worth studying. As I turned to leave, I felt her gaze follow me down the hallway, steady, unhurried, patient. And I understood the warning for what it was. Not a threat of violence. A promise of attention. The kind that doesn't loosen until it gets what it wants. Vivian didn't try to replace my mother. That would have been easier to reject. She replaced the atmosphere instead. Within a week, the house felt reorganized, not dramatically, but precisely. The mail was sorted differently. The pantry was labeled. The living room furniture shifted just enough to change the way you moved through it. Even the air felt calibrated. At dinner, she corrected my posture without touching me. "Shoulders back," she said evenly, as if she were commenting on the weather. "You collapse inward when you're uncomfortable." My father smiled like it was constructive. "She's always been shy." "I'm not shy," I said quietly. Vivian's eyes lifted to mine. "No," she replied. "You're observant. There's a difference." The comment should have felt like praise. It felt like exposure. She watched everything. The way I cut my food. The way I paused before answering. The way I measured my tone when speaking to my father. "You over-edit yourself," she noted one evening. "You apologize before anyone asks you to. That's not a crime." "No," she agreed. "It's a habit." She never raised her voice. Never accused. Never insulted. She refined. When I placed my bag on the counter one morning, she moved it slightly to the side. "Order matters," she said. "Clutter invites chaos. It's just a bag." "It's never just the object," she replied. "It's the mindset." The adjustments were small. The pattern wasn't. She began asking about my classes, not casually, but specifically. "Who leads the seminar? Do you challenge your professors, or do you default to compliance? Which of your classmates do you trust with your work?" The questions were surgical. She wasn't curious about my life. She was auditing it. At first, I tried to stay neutral. Short answers. Minimal engagement. Invisibility had protected me before, but invisibility seemed to irritate her. When I skipped dinner one night to study, there was a knock at my door. Not gentle, not aggressive, measured. "You don't get to opt out of family," she said when I opened it. The word family landed like an assignment I hadn't agreed to complete. "I have a deadline, and we have a table." Her gaze didn't waver. I felt the old instinct rising again: comply, reduce friction, survive. So I followed her downstairs. Halfway through dinner, I realized something unsettling. She wasn't correcting me because she disliked me. She was correcting me because she was studying me. And invisibility wasn't insulting her because she needed control. It was insulting her because she needed to be seen. The interference didn't start with confrontation. It started with convenience. "My car is already headed that way," Vivian said one morning, keys in hand. "I'll drive you to campus." I usually take the bus. It's inefficient. The word felt like judgment disguised as practicality. I didn't argue. The first ride was silent. The second, she asked about my internship applications. By the third, she had opinions. "You're underestimating yourself," she said, eyes fixed on the road. "That firm is mid-tier. Aim higher." I chose it for the culture. Culture is an excuse people use when they're afraid of pressure. Her tone wasn't mocking. It was certain. When I mentioned meeting a friend for coffee after class, she asked for her name. "Clara." "Is she ambitious?" The question caught me off guard. "I don't evaluate my friends that way." "You should," Vivian replied. Proximity shapes trajectory. Everything became strategic under her gaze. When I returned home one afternoon, my room looked improved. My books reorganized by subject. My desk cleared. My closet color-coded. "I didn't ask you to do that," I said carefully. "You didn't have to." She stood near the window, arms folded, examining the changes like she'd curated an exhibit. "You live reactively," she continued. "I prefer intention. It's my space. It's my house." The reminder was soft, firm. My father noticed none of it. Or perhaps he noticed and decided harmony mattered more than discomfort. One evening, I left my phone on the kitchen counter while grabbing water. When I returned, Vivian's gaze lifted from the screen just a second too slowly. "I wasn't reading," she said before I accused her. "I didn't say you were. You looked like you were about to." The room felt charged. "I care about who influences you," she added. "Or you want to control it?" Her eyes sharpened, not angry. Evaluating. "Control is a crude word," she said. "I prefer guidance." The interference tightened gradually. She rearranged my schedule without asking, moved a dinner with friends to attend a charity event with her, suggested I decline a weekend trip because distraction dilutes focus. "You're capable of more than small plans," she told me. Compliments replaced critiques, but they were sharper. "You're more perceptive than your father," she said once, almost absently. The comment landed like an invitation. Or a warning. The house felt smaller with every adjustment. Not because she raised her voice. Because she kept stepping closer. She wasn't managing the home anymore. She was managing my orbit. And I began to understand something dangerous. The more I tried to pull away quietly, the more deliberate she became. It wasn't the rules that unsettled me. It was the way she looked at me when I followed them. Vivian's gaze didn't wander. It didn't drift lazily across a room. It landed intentional, steady, assessing. When I spoke at dinner, she didn't interrupt. She listened with a focus that felt heavier than scrutiny. One evening, my father excused himself to take a call. The room quieted around us, the sound of the television faint in the background. "You analyze before you react," she said. "I don't think that's unusual. It is for someone your age." Her eyes held mine. There was no mockery in them. No maternal softness either. Just curiosity sharpened to a point. "You look at me like you're studying me," she added. I could say the same. A flicker. Not irritation. Recognition. "That's dangerous," she said softly. "For who?" "For both of us." The air shifted. She reached forward, not abruptly, not intimately, and adjusted the collar of my shirt. Her fingers brushed my skin for a second longer than necessary. You present yourself like you're trying to disappear, she said. You don't have to. The contact wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't aggressive. But it wasn't maternal either. It felt deliberate. I'm fine, I replied. You're contained, she corrected. The word echoed. She stepped back, reclaiming distance with controlled precision. I don't tolerate being ignored, she reminded me, almost absently. Especially by people who see me clearly. My chest tightened. I'm not ignoring you. No, she said. You're measuring me. The accusation was accurate. I had been watching for fracture lines, for signs of cruelty, for cracks in her composure. You're not as indifferent as you pretend, she continued. And you're not as unaffected as you act, I replied before I could stop myself. Silence thickened. Not explosive. Charged. Her lips curved, not a smile, not approval. Interest. You're more perceptive than your father, she said again, softer this time. That's inconvenient. For you. For the stability of this house. The implication lingered. This wasn't about replacing my mother. It wasn't about controlling dinner etiquette. It was about something far less visible. She didn't touch me like a mother. She touched me like a mirror, testing what reflected back. And mirrors don't stay neutral for long. As I stood to leave, I felt it again, that steady gaze tracking my movement down the hallway. Not protective. Not predatory. Focused. Like she was waiting for me to decide whether I would keep pretending I didn't understand what was changing between us. The confession came after an argument that had nothing to do with me. Or at least, that's what they pretended. My father's voice carried through the house, frustrated, strained. Vivian's remained controlled, low, precise. The argument wasn't loud enough to draw neighbors' attention, but sharp enough to slice through walls. I stayed in my room. That had always been my strategy, minimize presence during emotional storms. When the house fell quiet, I went downstairs for water. Vivian was in the kitchen alone, leaning against the counter. Her composure was intact, but thinner, like a veneer that had been scratched and polished over too quickly. You were listening, she said without turning. I wasn't. You always are. She faced me then. No dinner table posture. No polished distance. Just exhaustion edged with something more volatile. You think I married your father for romance? She asked. I don't know why you married him. For stability, she said. Predictability. A life that made sense on paper. And does it? Her jaw tightened slightly. It should. The honesty was unsettling. Then why argue? I pressed. Because he confuses affection with understanding. The statement hung between us. And you don't. I asked. She stepped closer, not invading space, but narrowing it. You look at me like you see through me, she said quietly. I didn't answer. That's dangerous, she repeated. For you. For the version of me I constructed. Her voice lowered, not seductively, but stripped. I built a life that required discipline, structure, containment. And then you walk into a room and refuse to be impressed by it. I swallowed. I'm not impressed by anyone, I said. That's what makes you difficult. Or honest. Her eyes flashed. You remind me of who I was before I decided to be practical, she admitted. The confession wasn't dramatic. It was measured. I don't like that you matter to me, she said. The words landed heavier than I expected. You shouldn't, I replied. I know. Silence pressed in. You married my father, I said carefully. Yes, and I'm not your project. I'm aware. Then what is this? Her gaze held steady. Curiosity, she said. The answer was too simple, too controlled. Obsession doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It recalibrates. And as she stepped back, smoothing the front of her blouse as if resetting herself, I realized something that unsettled me more than the confession itself. She wasn't losing control. She was acknowledging that I had it. After the confession, Vivian didn't retreat. She refined. The shift was subtle enough that my father never noticed. If anything, he seemed relieved. The arguments lessened. The house returned to its polished calm. But the calm had weight. You should reconsider that internship, she said one morning over coffee. It's provincial. It's competitive. It's small. So am I replied lightly. Her gaze sharpened. You are not small, she said, too quickly. The intensity in her voice made my pulse jump. "You don't belong in ordinary environments," she continued. "You think too far ahead. You observe too much. That kind of mind shouldn't settle." The flattery felt strategic. Like insulation, I began noticing the pattern. Every opportunity that moved me outward, away from the house, she questioned. Every plan that expanded my circle, friends, networking events, late study groups, she reframed as distraction. "You don't need them," she said once, dismissing a weekend trip with classmates. "They'll dilute you. And you won't." The question slipped out before I could edit it. Her expression didn't change. "I understand you," she said. It wasn't a boast. It was a claim. She began positioning herself as the only person who truly saw me, the only one who recognized my potential without underestimating it. My father remained peripheral, present, but uninvolved in the subtle negotiation unfolding between us. One evening, she stood too close while discussing my graduate school options. "You're like me," she murmured. "You don't belong in ordinary lives." The air felt thinner. "I'm not you," I said carefully. "No," she agreed. "But you could be." The implications slid beneath my skin. She wasn't trying to seduce me. She was trying to shape me, to position me as a reflection of what she might have been if she hadn't chosen stability over hunger. "You think I'm the answer to something," I said. Her gaze flickered, just briefly. "I think you're wasted where you are. In this house. In smaller versions of yourself." The words were intoxicating in the way validation often is. But validation can become containment if it narrows your world. I felt it then, the tightening. Not physical. Psychological. She wasn't building walls around me. She was rearranging the exits. And the more she positioned herself as the only one who understood me, the more I realized she wasn't trying to seduce me. She was trying to replace everything else. It happened in the study. Not in the kitchen. Not at the dinner table. In her space. The room smelled faintly of leather and paper, books lined in disciplined rows behind her desk. My father was out, late meeting, predictable absence. Vivian didn't look surprised when I stepped inside. "You've been avoiding me," she said. "No," I replied. "I've been recalibrating." A flicker crossed her expression, interest, not irritation. "That's a dangerous word," she said. "So is projection." Silence settled between us. "You've been discouraging my internships," I continued evenly. "Questioning my friends. Reframing my decisions like they're inferior. I'm refining them. You're isolating me." The word landed heavier than I intended. Her jaw tightened. "I'm protecting you from mediocrity." I didn't ask for protection. "You don't always know what you need." That was the fracture. "You sound like you own me," I said. Her composure slipped barely. "I don't. But you want to control the version of me that leaves this house." Her eyes held mine, unwavering. "You think I'm the villain," she said softly. "I think you're lonely." The word changed the temperature in the room. Loneliness is accusation without cruelty. "I chose stability," she replied after a moment. "I chose safety. And now I watch you walk around with hunger like it's oxygen. That's not my fault." "I know." Silence. "You married my father," I continued. "You built this life. I'm not your rebellion." Her gaze faltered for the first time since she moved in. "You think I don't know that?" she asked quietly. "I think you hoped proximity would blur it." The honesty sat between us, raw. "If I had met you first," she said suddenly, voice lower, "would it have been different?" The question hit harder than it should have, because it wasn't about seduction. It was about regret. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "And that uncertainty," she said, almost to herself, "is what makes you dangerous." I stepped back. "I'm not here to fix what you abandoned," I said. "And I'm not here to become your unfinished version of yourself." Her expression steadied again, composure reassembling piece by piece. "You're leaving," she said. "Yes." Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just fact. For the first time since she arrived in this house, she didn't correct me. She didn't refine the statement. She didn't claim control. She just watched. And in that watching, I saw it clearly. She wasn't obsessed with me. She was obsessed with what I represented. And I refused to become it. I didn't announce it. I researched apartments quietly between classes. Sent emails from campus instead of home. Signed a lease with a deposit I'd been saving since sophomore year. Vivian noticed before I said anything. "You've been organizing," she observed one evening as I sorted paperwork at the dining table. "I like structure," I replied. Her lips curved slightly. "I taught you that." "You reminded me," I said. It was already there. The distinction mattered. The night I told my father, he reacted the way I expected, confused, concerned, performing support. "Is this about space?" he asked. "You don't have to rush into independence." "I'm not rushing," I said. "I'm choosing." Vivian didn't interrupt. She stood near the window, arms crossed lightly, listening without defending herself. When I started packing, she didn't protest. She watched, folded shirts, stacked books, the slow dismantling of a presence she had spent months calibrating. "Are you angry with me?" she asked one afternoon, voice even. "No," disappointed. "No, then what?" "Finished." The word landed quietly. Control evaporates when proximity ends. She stepped closer, not enough to touch, but enough to test distance. "You think leaving resolves it," she said. "It resolves my role in it." Her gaze held mine, steady as ever. "You were the only person in this house who saw me clearly," she said. "That doesn't make me responsible for you." For the first time, she didn't respond immediately. The composure remained, but the certainty beneath it thinned. When the moving truck arrived, my father carried boxes. He called it growing up. A natural step. Vivian stood at the doorway. No tears. No dramatic plea. Just observation. As I placed the last box inside the truck, I looked back. She wasn't cold. She wasn't heartless. She was contained again, reassembling the version of herself that functioned without curiosity. "Goodbye," she said. It didn't sound like surrender. It sounded like recalculation. And as I drove away, I understood something I hadn't before. Distance doesn't end obsession. It only tests whether it survives without proximity. Freedom doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives in quiet rooms where no one rearranges your belongings. My apartment was small, imperfect, uneven floors, thin walls. But nothing in it moved unless I moved it. For the first time in months, silence felt neutral. Not watchful. Not measured. Just mine. Weeks passed without contact. My father called occasionally, skirting around my departure like it had been a scheduling decision instead of a rupture. He mentioned Vivian in passing, her charity events, her efficiency, her impeccable routines. "She's adjusting," he said. I didn't ask to what. Then, one evening, a message appeared on my phone. Unknown number. But I recognized the phrasing instantly. "You were the only person who ever saw me clearly." No apology. No accusation. No demand to return. Just a statement. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Because clarity is dangerous. It implies responsibility. It implies recognition that lingers beyond proximity. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of boundary. Loneliness had wrapped itself around her control, and for a moment, I had mistaken that entanglement for intimacy. But obsession isn't romance. It's hunger misdirected. And I refuse to be the answer to a question she never had the courage to ask herself. Sometimes the person labeled cold isn't heartless. She's simply unfinished. And sometimes the bravest act isn't staying to be understood. It's leaving before understanding becomes a cage. I set my phone down. The message remained unread. Because seeing someone clearly doesn't mean you owe them access. And whatever she felt, whatever part of her recalculated behind composed eyes, would have to survive without me.